everyone out there, welcome back. I think we all can agree that we're living in a pretty crazy time for science. And it feels like every day there's some new discovery or debate that's just, totally changing how we see the world.
Yeah, no doubt.
So today we're diving into this really interesting discussion called the crisis of science, credibility, trust, and the future.
Oh, I was looking forward to this one.
It's got some seriously smart people talking about some seriously big questions about what's going on with science today.
Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, something that really jumped out at me was this whole idea about, figures like Sean Carroll and Brian Greene, like big names in physics,
Yes,
right?
yeah, for sure.
It almost sounds like they're saying that those guys and others like them are kind of acting as like gatekeepers, right?
Gatekeepers. Okay, I'm intrigued. What do they mean, like gatekeepers of science?
Yeah, so it's a pretty bold claim, right? But basically what they're getting at is that because those guys are so focused on these established theories, the stuff that everyone agrees on,
Right.
it can kind of create this environment where it's really hard for like truly new ideas to break through.
Oh, I see. So it's not about whether Carroll and Green are right or wrong. It's more about the overall effect their influence might have on, well, like the whole scientific community.
Exactly. Like, think about it. Throughout history, so many big scientific breakthroughs have come from people who are willing to challenge the status quo,
Yeah.
to question what everyone thought they knew. But are we kind of losing that? Like, are we accidentally creating this culture where those kinds of, like, radical thinkers get shut down too quickly?
Mm. Yeah, that's a good point. And it's interesting because it seems like that kind of ties into this other trend we've been seeing, like how science is being questioned more and more these days.
Oh, yeah.
In the media, in politics, even just like everyday conversations. It's like everyone's a skeptic now, and it just feels harder to, have a reasonable conversation about science.
Absolutely. And the discussion really digs into this. It talks about how this erosion of trust in science is being driven by a bunch of different things. You've got political agendas, you've got misinformation spreading like wildfire online, and then you've even got, maybe some problems with how scientists themselves are communicating their work.
Yeah, I mean, think about the whole COVID pandemic, right? All that conflicting information, the debates about masks and lockdowns. It seemed like every day there was a new study saying something different.
Right. It was total information overload, and it really exposed those cracks in our relationship with science.
For sure. And what's even more interesting is that the discussion doesn't just blame the public for this mistrust, right? They point out some things that the scientific community could be doing better.
Yeah, like they brought up this example of like 77 Nobel laureates all signing this letter defending the EcoHealth Alliance.
Mm.
And they're saying that, maybe that wasn't the best look.
Right, because it kind of feeds into this perception that scientists are more interested in protecting each other than they are in actually getting to the truth.
Exactly. So even if their intentions were good, it can still raise those questions in the public's mind.
So then how do scientists deal with these really controversial issues, especially when it's stuff that directly affects people's health and safety? Like, how do they stay objective and keep that public trust?
It's a tough one, no doubt.
Yeah.
And this is where they get into another huge point. Scientists got to get better at talking to regular people.
You mean like communicating their research?
Yeah, yeah. They're saying that the old way of doing things where you just present your findings as like absolute truth without really acknowledging any uncertainty,
Yeah.
that just doesn't work anymore. It can actually backfire and make people even more suspicious.
Interesting. So it's not just about the science itself, it's about how you present it, how you talk about it.
Right. Because the audience has changed. We're bombarded with information all the time from all these different sources, and people are naturally more skeptical of authority now.
It's like we need a whole new approach to science communication.
Totally. It's about meeting people where they are, understanding their concerns, and having a real conversation instead of just lecturing at them.
It makes me think of that Harvard astronomer, Avi Loeb, the guy who's been doing all that work on UAPs,
Oh, interesting, yeah.
unidentified aerial phenomena. His whole approach, like being open to these kind of unconventional ideas, even if they sound a little out there, it's really grabbed people's attention.
He's definitely shaking things up. And whether you agree with him or not, he's doing a great job of getting people interested in science and making them think critically.
And it's such a contrast to that whole gatekeeping thing we were talking about earlier. Like, he's actively encouraging people to question assumptions and explore new possibilities.
And that's what makes this whole conversation so important. We got to remember that science isn't some fixed set of facts. It's this constantly evolving process of questioning, exploring, and, pushing the boundaries of what we know. And to do that, we need diverse voices, open minds, and a willingness to embrace the unknown.
Couldn't agree more.
It's funny, actually, how this whole thing about being open-minded and challenging assumptions kind of leads into another big point they make in the discussion. This idea that we're putting too much pressure on science to, like, prove its worth in economic terms.
So it's not enough to just discover something new. It also has to, like, make money.
Yeah, exactly. And what they're saying is that this whole show me the money attitude can actually end up holding science back. Like, if we're too focused on getting those immediate marketable results, we might miss out on the really groundbreaking stuff, the kind of research that might not seem useful right now, but could lead to huge discoveries down the line.
Right, because sometimes the most revolutionary ideas, they don't have any obvious applications at first.
Exactly. Think about things like quantum mechanics or general relativity. I mean, those didn't exactly scream money maker when they were first discovered, but they totally changed how we understand the universe.
And it led to countless technological advances that we, just take for granted today.
Totally. It's like trying to judge the value of a seed by just looking at it. You're not seeing the potential it has to grow into this amazing tree.
That's a great analogy. And, it's kind of disturbing, but they even use this phrase, welfare queens in white lab coats, to describe how some people view scientists.
Yeah, that's a pretty loaded term, and it kind of shows how much we've lost sight of the real value of science.
Right. It's this idea that scientific research, especially the kind that doesn't have an immediate payoff, is somehow a waste of money.
Exactly. But we forget how much scientific progress impacts every aspect of our lives. I mean, medical breakthroughs, new technologies, environmental solutions, all of that comes from years, sometimes decades, of research.
Research that might not have had any clear commercial applications at the time.
Right. So, how do we change this perception? How do we get people to see that science isn't just about gadgets and profits, but about understanding the world around us?
Yeah, the big question.
Well, in the discussion, they suggest that one way to re-engage people with science is through, and I know this sounds a little dramatic, but they call them existential threats.
Existential threats. Okay, that got my attention. What do they mean by that?
Well, think about historical examples, like the Manhattan Project, for instance, the development of the atomic bomb. That was driven by the very real fear of, Nazi Germany.
Right. It was a terrifying time, but it also brought this huge surge in public interest and funding for science.
Exactly. And they're saying that something similar could happen if, let's say, we discovered a giant asteroid headed straight for Earth.
Oh, wow.
Suddenly, everyone would be looking to science to save the day.
I guess it's like we don't really appreciate science until we're faced with a situation where our very survival is on the line.
That's a good point. And they even suggest that artificial intelligence, or AI, could be our modern-day existential threat.
Oh, yeah. AI is definitely one of those things that's got everyone talking right now.
Right. It's got the potential to revolutionize so many aspects of our lives. But it also raises these huge ethical questions about, control, bias, and what it even means to be human.
It's like AI is forcing us to confront some really deep questions about the kind of future we want to create.
Exactly. And that's where science becomes even more important. We need scientists to not only develop these powerful technologies, but also to be part of this bigger conversation about their implications, to help us figure out how to use them responsibly.
It's a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
And it kind of brings us back to this whole issue of trust, right? Like, if we're going to navigate these complex challenges, we need a public that understands and values science.
Couldn't agree more. And that's why this whole discussion about scientific literacy and public engagement is so important. It's about closing that gap between the scientific community and the rest of society.
So how do we do that? How do we actually rebuild that trust and make sure everyone has access to good, solid scientific information?
Well, I think, even though we've been talking about all these challenges, there's a lot to be optimistic about.
Huh?
I mean, just the fact that we're having these conversations, right? That we've got all these really smart people thinking critically about these issues. It's a good sign.
Yeah, it's like we're at this crossroads, right? Where we can either keep going down this path of distrust and misinformation, or we can try to build something better, a future where science is valued and understood.
Exactly. And I honestly think we're already starting to see that happen.
Hmm.
Like there are more and more scientists out there who are really passionate about communicating with the public, using social media, podcasts, all sorts of ways to make science more accessible and engaging.
It's like science is becoming cool again, which is awesome.
Totally. And it's not just about, making science trendy. It's about showing people how crucial it is for dealing with all these huge problems we're facing, like climate change, pandemics, food security, all that stuff.
So it's not just knowledge for knowledge's sake, it's about using that knowledge to actually make the world a better place.
Exactly. And that's where, everyone has a role to play. This discussion really emphasizes that a scientifically literate society is absolutely essential if we want to make progress on any of these issues.
Right, it's about being curious, asking questions, and, not just accepting things at face value, but actually digging a little deeper.
Absolutely. And it starts with, just small things, talking to your friends and family about science, supporting organizations that do science education, just being a voice for reason and evidence-based thinking.
Right, like helping to create this culture where science is valued and respected.
Exactly. And that's what makes me hopeful. The future of science isn't set in stone. You know, it's something we all create together. And if we embrace curiosity, critical thinking, and open dialogue, I think we can make sure that science keeps being this force for good in the world.
I love that. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you all with one final thought. If science were to just vanish tomorrow, what would you miss the most? What would the world even look like without all the incredible things that science has given us? It's something to think about. And that's it for this episode. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of science. We'll see you next time.